Hello there, my beautiful book lovers. My name is Kimia, and welcome back to my book nook. So today's video, we are going to do something a little bit different, but not so much. Recently, I had some friends of mine asking me about the events that are happening in Iran at the moment. And so for those of you who might not know, I am originally from Iran. So I have been following the news very closely, and it has been very much just upsetting, honestly, with everything that is going on. And I thought it would be a great idea to share some books that are about people of Iran and Iran's history, because now that there's a lot of news about what's going on in the country, some people do not have the correct information, some they don't have enough information, and there's always in these situations, there's just so many things are being said, and we're not sure what exactly is right or not. And I thought I could be of some little help to share some books that I found very sort of resonating with me and my history and my knowledge of the country. So without further ado, let's get into them. First book on the list, it's obviously one of the most well-known books, I feel, when it comes to sort of contemporary Persian literature, and that is Persepolis by Marjan Satrapi. This book is actually based on the author's life and the events that happened to her and her family during the revolution that happened in 1970s in Iran. And we are following this young girl that was living in a very loving, happy family during the Shah's regime. And then by the time that the revolution happened and the Shah was out and we had this sort of new political regime, how and the changes in the everyday lives of people, how this young girl is coming of an age in that era. And the reason that this book is very, very much loved, it's because it's so beautifully and well told through the lens of this young girl that it's already, when you're young and you're sort of growing up, you already have a little bit of a hard time to figure out what you're doing, what you're going to do, and to figure out what are the norms of everyday life. And then when you go through such a big change that sort of shakes your entire country and life and lifestyle, it is so much harder to get used to it and adapt to it. And I found this book fascinating because as a person who has been hearing stories from my family members, my parents, grandparents, when they went through during the revolution and the war afterwards, and how much they were sort of trying to get used to it, adapt to it, fight it. And so I feel this would be a nice and a good sort of an introduction to this story and to the history of the country, and specifically to the revolution. So you can get a better idea of how it changed and how much people were sort of agreeing and disagreeing with those changes. And since this book is sort of in the comic style, it's actually very fun, or at least enjoyable in a sense, to read and follow this story, because I really also like the style that it was illustrated, because it really makes you to connect with this young girl and her coming of an age story, really. Then we have Iran Awakening, a memoir of revolution and hope by Shireen Ebadi. This book is about Shireen Ebadi, who was the first women judge in the country after the 1970s revolution. And that at a time was such a huge achievement, even to this day, honestly, because after the change, and especially for a country that had this sort of history of patriarchy and the way that they will look at women and their sort of role in the society, it was such a big achievement for her to reach that level. And we're following her through this journey from her early childhood all the way to the point that she becomes a judge, and then the backlash that she faces, and then she's sort of pushed out of that position, and that makes her to actually really, really look at the role that she can play as a woman to save and help other women and people that are being mistreated. In this book, it's very important because it's very eye-opening to truly see what she went through and how much she needed to fight for something that anybody should not really fight for. Anybody, despite you being a woman or a man, should be able, that as long as you are qualified to be able to become a judge. And so with this book, there were parts of it that I do not fully agree with per se, But nonetheless, I feel that it's a very, very important read because it is still gives a very truly realistic version of women's life in Iran, especially again after the revolution. It really showcased the hardship that they face every single day just to have a normal life, just to be equal, just to be able to achieve their goals, especially because the most recent protest that was happening for the women life freedom movement, it is very eye-opening to see that, to feel that, to touch it, to really experience that why these women and the society in general and the majority of the public are truly pushing for that equality for everyone and everything, but specifically very much for women, that how hard it is to live in a society that it's constantly trying to push you and force you back into home or very specific rules in the society. So if you are interested to learn a little bit more about that history, I highly recommend this book. It is a sort of a hard read, especially because some of the cases are truly just very heartbreaking, but nonetheless, it's an important story that needs to be shared and told. Next, we have The Lonely War by Nazila Fathi. This is also another very, all of these books are honestly very interesting in their own way. This book, it's about Nazila, who she is the first New York Times correspondent in Tehran, and she is reviewing these very major events after the 1970s revolution in Iran and touch base on the Iran and Iraq war, the Green Movement, and the Reform movement. And so you get a sort of a history lesson. Truly, she's a journalist, so she is really going through all of these details for all of these events, and we are following her sort of interviewing people that were involved, people who were arrested, people who faced very, very horrific hardship during those times and those movements. And I very much was fascinated by these stories because, again, you see a lot, just so much in news, and you hear some stories from here and there, friends, family members, friends of a friend, but nonetheless, when you actually get the first-hand story of people who actually were there, people who were actually arrested, and how they were treated and what happened to them, and how they were feeling throughout all of that time, it's truly just one of those things that it's like makes you question so many things. And it's also, in my opinion, a great source for people who do not have enough information about these things to actually be able to read the story of people who were involved in it, who were at that point of the time, at that location. And so if you have been interested to really see if some of the stories that comes out of the prison and people who were arrested, if they are true or not, this would be a great sort of book to look into. And also it gives you again a story of a woman that herself, she has been threatened so many times because of the stories that she was sharing, and how she was getting all of these information out to be able to share it with the world, to be able to really, especially because like when you live in a country that it's a dictatorship and they censor a lot of information and do not want to share it not only with people around the world but also like the people within the country, it is very hard, and it's very brave, honestly, to take it upon yourself to share all those information with the rest of the world. So it's a great book, honestly. And again, if you are interested to learn a little bit more about the topic, I highly recommend this book. Then we have Whales and Words by Farzaneh Milani. This is a wonderful book. This book, it's really about the history of women in literature in Iran, and it follows from late 1800, I believe, and comes all the way to more recent and modern sort of authors and poets, and really touch base on the very, very like the most well-known authors, female authors of Iran. And I enjoyed it so much because, again, some of them I knew about, some of them I have sort of studied when I was in school, and some of them I had no idea about. And it was so fascinating to see how much because of the time frame that they were living, how much they changed as we move forward through time. And yet there are some elements that they are still very much the same. There are struggles that they're all still facing and trying to fight it back. And that's the beauty of literature, I feel, because it's a theme that it's all around the world, that sometimes even when I read like sort of English literature, that I noticed that some of the problems that they were facing in their times, no matter how many years ago, we are still facing as a modern society. And so that's a reason with this book I found it fascinating to see that by the change of the regime, by the change of like the dynasty, by the change of just like technology and everything that comes with it, how much these voices has changed and how much they have stayed the same. And so if you're interested to learn a little bit more about the history, and especially again the history of female authors, I will highly recommend this book. It is very fascinating, and it's just so, it's always lovely to like, you know, be able to find sort of new authors to read from and about. And then we have Sin Selected Poems by Forough Farrokhzad. Forough Farrokhzad, she is one of the, I think, the most well-known sort of poets of modern Iran, and she is phenomenal. She is truly something else, and her poems, they are so I don't want to say simple, but like they are simple in a sense that you can read them very easily and get what she's trying to tell you. But they're also so just poetic, but also just beautifully written and symbolic, that it touches your heart. And it is so just heartbreaking to see this woman. And I actually, first of all, because I wanted this book to come after the Whales and Words, because she is mentioned in that book as well. And then you get a little bit of sense of her history and her story and what she went through. And then by the time that you have that little background, and you start to read her poems, it's just so heartbreaking. Honestly, she was such a pioneer, and she was truly a feminist icon in Iran, because how much she was pushing back with all of these nonsense sort of standards and roles for women that they were forcing her and a lot of other women to just take some very specific roles in the society and be like mothers and housewife. And not that there's anything wrong with those. We all know that, like, you know, it's more about your choices, that like, do you want to be a mother? Wonderful, stay home and be a mother. Do you want to work and be a mother? Wonderful, do that. So that's a reason that like her poems are just so unique in that sense, because you feel that hurt, you feel that heartbreak. And it's about like a lot of different things. It's about her life, her broken heart, her relationships, what she was facing when she was going through a sort of a depression episode. And so she's fantastic, honestly. I have read her works in Farsi, and so I very much enjoy it more, obviously, because I feel like with translation it's always like a little bit different, and when you read it in Persian, in Farsi, it is just a little bit like touches you deeper. But nonetheless, with some of the translation that I have read, it still sort of gives you the point that it was trying to make. So I still recommend that if you're able to find a book in English, give it a try. If you want to try it in Persian, honestly, even better. So she's my favorite. She's one of the all-time, honestly. And I'm a person that I do not really read poetry that much, but she is one of those that I very much enjoy and would highly recommend. And last but not least, I wanted to actually end the video with a fiction book, because I feel, you know, there's always so much truth in fiction, and it is sometimes much easier to follow it compared to, like, you know, a non-fiction book. And this is a book that I believe I have mentioned it before in like maybe 1 or 2 videos, and that is The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali. This is such a fantastic book. This book, it's about Roya, and she's a young girl during the period of the revolution, and there's this stationery shop that honestly, first of all, I would love to visit, and get a chance to actually walk in that shop because it sounds so lovely. And she goes there, and then one day she meets this young guy, Batman, and they fell in love, and we are following them and their stories, and we are following them actually through decades, because the events that happens and things that happen that really affects their lives and change their lives and their path. And we are going through all of these different periods of time with them, and I enjoy this book so much. It is so intriguing because it's, again, one of those stories that you really want to see what is going to happen to these characters. They're so lovely, and they're so, like, they feel alive. They feel like a person that you might have known. And so if you are looking for a fiction, because, like, you know, it's always great to read nonfiction. We do need that when we're doing a little bit of research or we want to learn a little bit more about a new topic, but sometimes it's good to maybe take a break and read a fiction in between, just to have a like clean palette. And so if you're looking for a fiction in this category, I highly recommend this book because it's super fun. And by that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I would love to just take a second and ask you to please truly take a look at what is happening in Iran. Please share their news. Please talk about how these people are asking for their freedom to be able to have a country that belongs to them, that it's truly for them, by them, and how important it is that, you know, be on the right side of the history, and to really, and I don't want to say anything in a sense of persuade anyone in any direction, and that's the reason I felt that I should share this video, simply to let you do your own research, read your own books, and try to get a better understanding and perspective of not just what has been happening like for the past few weeks, or even like the past couple of months or year, but all these time through the like the past 40 something years, and even before that, to get a better understanding of the history of the country and everything that has been related to it, and how much everybody had a sort of a role in this revolution, in this change, and in the way that things has turned out. And after that, you will be much more knowledgeable to make your own decision that how you want to support, which side you want to support. But what is really important is just to support the people, because at the end of the day, nobody truly, nowhere around the world, deserve to be forced to do something, be something, live a certain way, and everybody should have the freedom to be who they are and be able to live freely. So anyway, that was for this video. I hope you give these books a chance. I hope I will be able to share a little bit of a history of my country with you through these books. And till the next video, happy reading.